Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Ute Dash, the Utah football show on Dash Sports. I'm your host for tonight's show, Cole Bagley, and I'm the assistant sports editor of the Daily Utah Chronicle here in Salt Lake. And I am joined by my co-host, Sammy Mora, the sports editor for the Daily Utah Chronicle. Sammy, how are you?
I'm good, Cole. It's been a wild day in the sports world, but I'm always game to talk a little Utah football.
Well, good, because we have got a lot of Utah football to talk today. We've got a couple things we want to go over first. The first one that we are going to just jump right into today is which position group does the postponement benefit the most? Now, we know there's not going to be a fall season. We have been postponed to spring. Sammy, tell us who is going to benefit the most here.
The Utah secondary. Obviously, hands down, that group was the most decimated after the draft last year. Not only do you lose Jalen Johnson to the draft, you also lose Josh Nurse, Javelin Guidry, Julian Blackman. There's four of your starters right off the bat just gone. So I think that's going to be a huge. You lost R.J. Hubert in the Pac-12 championship game to a torn ACL. This gives him a little bit more time to rehab, get back up to 100% where we want him to be, because he's going to be probably one of those starting safeties for Utah. But then this also gives the incoming freshman class a lot of time to get more prepped. Like Clark Phillips, the highest touted recruit Utah's ever landed. He now has a little bit more time to get used to stuff. Also, Kane Savage at the other corner spot, and then even Nate Ritchie, the safety out of Lone Peak High School, gives him some time to get caught up in that safety position as well. But then you also have kids who have been on the roster last year and saw time, like Travis Broughton, to get him more up to speed and get him maybe contending for that second corner spot. So honestly, in my opinion, I think it's going to be the secondary for Utah. What about you, Cole?
The offense for me, specifically the quarterbacks, and specifically getting even deeper, Bentley. And the reason I say that is because, last week we talked a lot about that quarterback race. And, we had some differing opinions. I had talked about how I think Bentley will be the starter because of the experience. And, he's played a lot more football, collegiate football, than Cameron Rising. Now, you obviously supported the Cameron Rising because he's been with the team longer. Now, I think this benefits Jake because he gets to be with the team longer. He gets to add that to what he already has in his experience is just time with the team. And so I think he benefits the most because I think that in itself will further his chances of taking the snaps come springtime.
Yeah, I see that. But honestly, I'm not worried about the quarterback position. You have two, like we talked about last week, you have two very viable options in that quarterback spot. But if anyone on the offense is like an area to like circle, in my opinion, it's the Utah offensive line. You last year you lost one or two potential starters, but you were playing a lot of like freshmen and sophomore on that line, with the exception of Orlando Umana, who was a junior at the time. Nick Ford has really solidified himself as one of Utah's best offensive linemen on the team right now. Same with Umana. But I think that offensive line, you're going to have a little bit more time for them to get working better and meshing together a little bit, and they can finally solidify a lineup that would work on the offensive line for Utah. There was a lot of substitutions last year. Now we're going to get some more depth. Bamadele Olaseni's finally going to be able to participate in like a full camp instead of like the abbreviated camp that he participated in last fall because he like struggled to get to campus. So you have that offensive line, I think, is a bigger issue for Utah than the quarterback position.
Well, Utah's coming off of a difficult situation. They lost a lot of defensive weapons to your point. A lot of guys that made big plays, Julian Blackman, Francis Bernard, fantastic defensive players to the NFL. But they also lost the two biggest pieces of their offense in Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss. And Tyler, to me, was not the best passer. I think they're much more geared towards a running offense. And so I think with this time off, Utah now has to change the way that their offense is going to work. It's going to be a passing offense if they choose Bentley in the spring. And so he has to have this time in order to get that starting position and then to work with the wide receivers who are an absolute arsenal. And if they can perfect that and they can use this time to their advantage, Utah is going to be much better off offensively in the spring than they would have been if the season had started in the fall.
Yeah, I get that, but also you can't say that Utah's going to go to a full like pass heavy offense. You still have two very good running backs at Utah with Brumfield and Wilmore, Devin Brumfield and Jordan Wilmore. So you have these backs that are also that backed up Moss last year, who took reps last year, who took some of the burden off Moss, who have proven themselves to be really good running backs. So I'm not worried about that. I can see if Utah goes more to like a 60-40 situation, but I don't see Utah going to a strictly like a Washington State in an air raid offense. That's just not who Utah is. That's not who Kyle Whittingham is. That's not who Andy Ludwig is, in my opinion, for this team. Like, we have offensive weapons that are really good, like Britton Covey, Brian Thompson, Brant Keithy. But on the other side, you still have these running backs who are so good and so talented and so great at what they do. So I just think there's a lot more question marks with that Utah defense than there are with that Utah offense.
Sammy, what do you think the biggest hole in the defense is that they need to focus on with this extra time?
So corners or linebackers. So with the corners, you lose all three of your corners that took reps last year. You lose Jalen Johnson, you lose Josh Nurse, and you lose Tariq Lewis. You lose all three of them. So you're going to have to fill those corner spots first and foremost. But then the linebacker, you lost half of your really good duo of Francis Bernard and Devin Lloyd. Lloyd's going to be back this year, but who's going to take that second linebacker spot? Is it going to be Andrew Mataafa? Is it going to be Nephi Sewell? Who's going to be in that second linebacker spot is also really important to me. I'm not worried about the Utah defensive line. They've proven time in and time again that they just reload with talent just over and over and over. And even though we lost Bradley and Lecky Fotu on that line and John Pennicini, you still have Mika Tafua, Max Tupai, Huatui Pututau. You have all of these guys who took snaps last year and who were made big plays for the Utah defense. So it's the corners or the linebackers.
Yeah, and when you bring up those names, that's why to me it seems that the offense is just gonna benefit more. You mentioned the running back game, and those guys did take some snaps, but I think they are lacking a little bit of experience because Zach Moss just dominated in the backfield. He was taking the majority of the reps. He was scoring the touchdowns. I mean, the guy he's the all-time Utah leading rusher, and so I think that the offense just has a lot to work on, specifically the quarterback as well. Those running backs, and they've got to have a good chemistry with all of those wide receivers. You had mentioned, you've got Keithy, Covey, and so these guys have got to get a chemistry going, and that's why in my opinion, the offense is definitely going to take this time and improve. But hopefully, Sammy, both of them improve. We're all on the same team here. We're all on the same side. We don't want to see one more than the other. We want to see the team come together as fully as possible.
Totally. I'm not worried about the chemistry within this wide receiver group. Also, honestly, like, you lose one receiver, you lose Damari Simpkins. You still have that core group that you had last year. Of course, like, you're going to add new pieces and stuff like that. But right now, this Utah wide receiving core is it's really solid. It's really solid, and it's probably one of the most talented wide receiving cores we've had since joining the Pac-12, in my opinion. Like, you have Samson Nakua, you have Brian Thompson, you have Brant Keithy, you have Solomon Enos. All of these are really, really, really big playmakers for Utah in that receiving core. So I'm not worried about the chemistry between the wide receivers. I do want to see the chemistry between the wide receivers and the quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
Because these wide receivers have been with Rising before, so they know what he's capable of. But I want to see how they react to having Bentley, if they have to work on something like that.
Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the team develops, what things Whittingham's able to do. That man works magic with the roster and the players that he's given. Let's move on to our second topic of discussion, Sammy. So, what we want to discuss here at this second point is, what would Utah's record be after a conference-only schedule? So originally, the Pac-12 said, okay, no out-of-conference games. We're doing a Pac-12 schedule. We all got hyped for that. We were going to see Utah play each of the Pac-12 teams. Sammy, let's go through what the schedule was set to be before the cancellation of the season and the postponement to spring. Let's talk about how we would have expected these games to go.
Totally. So Utah was supposed to open up the season at Washington State. We all know Washington State, new head coach, new coaching staff. You don't really know what's going to come out of Pullman right now. I had this game as a win. I don't think it's the air raid offense that Leach ran. Gunnar Cruz is probably the most the sturdiest quarterback that they have on roster. Honestly, we know him. He's from Utah. I just think Utah is able to pull out the win. I don't know if it's lack of chemistry issues between the new coaching staff and the student athletes, what's going on. I just think Utah goes into Pullman and starts the season off with a win.
I agree with you, Sammy. When I was thinking about these games, it's interesting because, normally you would have to think, okay, is this a home game or an away game? And that either gives you a little bit of extra oomph if you're playing in front of the muss, or it might give you a little bit of a disadvantage if you're playing against, at somebody else's home in front of their home fans. But this game would have been played in front of no fans, to my understanding. But I still think Utah would come out with a W, a close one, somewhere in the range, maybe 21-17, 21-14, something like that. Just because it's early in the season, there's so many new dynamics coming into this Utah football roster, and so that to me would be a W, but it would be a close one.
Yeah, I think that just seeing how the young Utah defense would react to the situation that they were in. I think the first few games for Utah are going to be really, really, really key to figuring out how this defense is going to work this season.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
So the second game is Utah stays on the road, and they take a little trip to Colorado. The Battle of the Rockies. Sammy, what do you expect from that game?
Rumble in the Rockies. It's not a rivalry, in my opinion. Hot take. It's not. Utah has had their way with Colorado, and this year I think they have the same thing. Mel Tucker, not the best, or he's a good, but I don't know how good he's going to be with this Colorado team since he was brought in. So, sorry, it was blanking on his name, but their new coach, with him bringing him in, I don't know. They brought him in so late. How is he going to react to this team? How is the team going to react to him? And I just think that Utah is able to go into the Colorado game and win. Carl Darnell, sorry. Thank you for that. But I think that Utah goes into Colorado and gets the dub with that one as well.
Yeah, again, Sammy, I agree with you. This to me is not a rivalry like another game that Utah plays down south. It's big brother, little brother, and Utah is the big brother. Despite the changes in the rosters on both offense and defense, Colorado's going through with a lot of the same things and a new coaching staff. To me, Utah goes into Colorado and they come out with a 2 or 3 possession win over the Buffs.
For sure. Then Utah, finally, home game for Utah. Utah hosts Oregon State. I say this is a win, but I think it's a little bit closer than what some people would expect. Oregon State really started to gain momentum towards the end of last season. They almost became bowl eligible. And I just think it's a close game. Again, this is going to be the first big test for the Utah secondary, in my opinion. I think that this team, Oregon State, you never know what you're going to get. They have a lot of really good wide receivers. They have some running backs. They have a really good offense. So I think it's a close game, and it's a big test for the Utah secondary.
Yeah, I agree with you on the W. To me, like you said, that Oregon State started to pick up some steam at the end of last season, which is absolutely true. They almost became bowl eligible, but that to me, almost isn't doing it right. Mm-hmm. Oregon State was getting torched early on in the season last year, and I think at this point, we're 3 games in. It's a game at home. I think Utah really gets rolling with their offense, with those wide receivers, and I think they take advantage of a little bit of a weaker secondary, in my opinion, from Oregon State. And I think they would win this one by maybe 3 or even 4 possessions. And I think Utah's defense would step up to the plate there against Oregon State.
For sure. Then Utah hits the road yet again, going to Westwood, taking on UCLA. This is a win for me. DTR had a terrible game against Utah last year. He struggled so hard. And even though like it's a different Utah defense, I just think that he's gonna struggle against this Utah defense again. I think this is gonna be a consistent thing we see is DTR struggling against the Utah defensive line. They're just gonna overpower that UCLA offensive line and just get to him and make his life terrible.
Oh, I agree. I was at last year's game. That was a home game, a fantastic game to be at because Utah ran up the score and UCLA struggled to get into the end zone. I think they had 3 or 4 turnovers in the red zone against the Utah defense. That's a different Utah defense than we're seeing this year. But again, I don't see UCLA putting very many points on the board, maybe a touchdown, a couple field goals. But I think Utah, again, keeps that perfect season alive here, going for starting off 4-0 and just really taking it to UCLA.
Yeah. Then at home versus Arizona, I give this a W. I don't know what Arizona's ever doing, honestly. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. How are they going to look without JJ Taylor? That's a huge question mark for me. Plus, 2 of their their biggest stars on defense just announced they're transferring from the program. How is that going to change how this Arizona team looks? And I just think Utah's going to get the Wildcats yet again.
Arizona's lost their identity to me. I think it's a program that really needs to look itself in the mirror and figure out what the problems are. Change up how they're recruiting and find some new players because they have just been underperforming. When you're consistently beat by BYU, you've got some problems. When you can't fill your stadium up with more Wildcats than you can Cougars, you got a problem. So I agree with you, Sammy. This to me is a blowout. I don't even know if Arizona puts points on the boards against that Utah defense.
Mm-hmm. So next, Arizona State, probably the toughest test that the Utes will face up to this point in week 6. I have Utah coming out with an L on this one. Nothing good happens to Utah when they go to Tempe. Last time we were in Tempe, Tyler Huntley broke his collarbone. Not good. We lost. Also, there was the touchdown. That was not the touchdown with Solomon Enos. We all know the story. It should have been a touchdown. Nothing good happens to Utah in Tempe. I think that Jaden Daniels just torches that Utah defense. That young secondary just blows them apart. There's no way Utah comes out with a W in this one.
Yeah, Sam, I completely agree. Playing at ASU is never easy. Those fans are crazy. It's out in the desert, and Utah has a bad history against the Sun Devils. The overall head-to-head, I believe, is either 13-1 in favor of the Sun Devils or 13-2. Utah just, for whatever reason, cannot figure out, how to torch those guys out in the desert, and so. I think, like you said, that offense for ASU is just going to take advantage of the young secondary that Utah has and put up quite a few points. While I think the offense just struggles because Arizona State has had some time to grow, to learn, and they're looking definitely scary and someone that could potentially oust the Utes for the Pac-12 South.
Yeah. Then Utah would host Washington. You and I see differently on this one. I think Utah gets the W. Whole new coaching staff at UW. You lose Jacob Eason. You lose your running backs. You lose a couple wide receivers. Your secondary, kind of in the same position as Utah's. You lose key pieces of that. I think Utah can beat Washington for the second year in a row. Not only is it at Rice-Eccles Stadium, but I just think Utah can get this one from UW.
Yeah, I could see those things. But Washington has definitely created an incredible program over the last couple of years. They have taken, besides this last season where I was thrilled that Utah finally beat Washington. The past couple of years, Utah has struggled. Now you do make some good points that the school is replacing their quarterback and their coaching staff, but there's a lot of good players that are still on that Washington roster. And again, Utah is not replacing their coaching staff. Hopefully it's Coach Witt until the end of times. But for me, with the new arrangement of defense and a new quarterback and running backs trying to fight for that, starting position, I think Washington gets back on track and bests the Utes.
So next, Utah goes to Cal. I have this as a W. Utah, Cal, yet again, another team like Oregon State that showed a lot of promise last year. I just think this is one that Utah can easily get a W from as well.
Yeah, I agree. Cal has not been great as of late. I think they have similar issues with Arizona. I don't know what their identity is, and to me, their recruiting has not been great. And I think again, the Utes. I think they rolled Cal in this one.
So last two games for Utah, you have USC at home. This game always has huge implications for the Pac-12 South, and I think it will this season whenever the next season happens, but I think Utah does not come out on top. Keaton Slovis, insane. Amon-Ra St. Brown, insane. I just think, yet again, this is another situation where will the Utah secondary be able to keep up with this? Because last year with Matt Fink, we weren't able to. So will we be able to keep up with them? No. Again, I'm sorry, it's an L. I wish we could get over the hump of beating USC and like finally being able to finish a game against them, if that makes sense.
That to me is the next great hump for Utah to get over. Before it was beating Washington, now it's beating USC. And I agree with you, Sammy. Despite it being at home, I think USC. I think it's close. I think it's another close battle. But yeah, with that quarterback that they've got against that young secondary, it's not a good equation. It doesn't look good, and Utah drops this one despite a close battle.
Yeah, and then finishing off the season, the rematch of the ages, Utah versus Oregon, actually was slated to be on the actual like anniversary of us playing Oregon last year, which was not looking too good. I still think Utah comes out with an L. This game is a battle of the trenches. Utah prides themselves on having one of the best defensive lines in the Pac-12, and Oregon prides themselves on having one of the best offensive lines. It's a battle in the trenches, and I just think it's one that Utah just can't win. Also, Kayvon Thibodeau versus that Utah offensive line last year he destroyed it. So Utah just can't. Utah and Oregon, another game that Utah needs to be able to get over that hump and be able to come out on top in.
Yeah, I mean, Utah's gone back and forth with Oregon a little bit. 2 years ago they did beat them at Rice Eccles, but this last year it was a struggle, an unfortunate struggle that surprised me, to be honest. But with the departure of Herbert to the NFL, I think the Utes at this point in the season, you're 10 games in, you're playing at home. I think Coach Witt will have gotten that defense together, and I think the offense as well. Will be going again, another close one, but I believe Utah would come out on top against the Ducks, somewhere 35-31, 28-27, something just really close, but Utah over Oregon for me, and finishing the season 9-3.
I have Utah finishing this season with 3 losses and 7 wins, just 3 losses.
7-3. Excuse me.
Yeah, Utah just coming out with the losses against Arizona State, USC, and Oregon. So
for sure. All right, Sammy. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the season actually does go in the spring. But for our last topic today, shifting a little bit. So he played at Utah, one of the best all-time quarterbacks for the University of Utah to produce, Alex Smith. Let's talk about this leg injury that he had and how we expect him to do now that he has been cleared to play. So, Sammy, what do you got?
So, breaking his leg in 2 different places, 17 surgeries, almost losing his leg, almost losing his life. It's not worth the risk. Just because he was cleared to play doesn't mean that he should play. I love Alex Smith. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks in all of Utah history. Just because you are given permission to do something doesn't mean you should. I would be scared to hit him as a defensive player, scared that I would break him. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Well, Alex Smith, comeback player of potentially the decade, the century. Mm-hmm. This guy almost died. The injury was a compound leg fracture. Following the surgery on the fracture, Alex got a really bad infection, and there was a colonization of bacteria all throughout his soft tissue, and the doctors actually had to remove huge portions of muscle, skin, and tissue. And they discovered that he had flesh-eating bacteria. That is insane. He was septic, so that means that his organs were failing and he had extremely low blood pressure. So he's essentially dying. This guy was dying because of an injury that he got from the NFL. Now, over the course of 9 months, like you said, Sammy, 17 surgeries, and almost 2 years after the injury, Alex has been cleared for football activity. And I've seen some images, some photos. He's lacing up. He's putting pads on. He's putting helmets on. He is throwing passes. Now, is this a good idea? Maybe. I can't say yes or no one way or the other because, yes, he's a little bit older, and he got a really bad injury, and almost died. But to me, that was so rare to have happened. And it was a nasty injury. I don't think that's an injury that's going to happen to him again. To me, it's not like an ACL tear where you tear it once, you go out and play again, you step the wrong way and you tear it again. This is a freak injury. And I think if Alex really wants to give it a go, why not try?
The risks in this are so high. There's risks that the injury could happen again. It could be a worse break. He could actually lose his leg. He could actually die. There's a lot of things that outweigh playing football. Alex, from what we understand, is like knowing his situation, he's been really financially like conservant. He knows like how to manage his money. It's not like he's been spending money on Ferraris and Lamborghinis and just blowing all of his money. He's been safe. So it's not like he would run out of funds. He's safe. He's good on that aspect. Just finish out your contract. Back up Dwayne Haskins. Even maybe be third string. Washington is not in a position where they're like in dire need of figuring out who their quarterback is. Dwayne Haskins is their quarterback. Alex Smith, I love him to pieces. I just don't think he ever takes another live snap, ever. There's just no way. And if you're Ron Rivera, you have to think about it. Like, do you really want to risk this dude's life to play football? Alex has some young kids. Like, do you want to have to be the reason that his kids don't have a dad? Like, there's so many options. Like, I love him. Don't play. Just finish it out.
So just to give you some numbers of what Alex did before this injury, he played 10 games. He had a 62.5% completion rate. Over 2,000 yards. He averaged 6.7 yards a pass. He had 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And his quarterback rating was 85.7. To me, should he come back and start? No, absolutely not. But why not stick around? Why not see, hey, maybe the first string quarterback gets injured. Maybe the second string quarterback gets injured. And you come in, you play a couple snaps, you throw the football around a little bit, and you kind of just ride off into the sunset. I think that's the biggest thing for Alex is he didn't want to finish football with a gruesome injury that almost killed him. Alex Smith, to me, it seems that he wants to have a final season to play one more time, to contribute to a team, and then finish. And I think that's what he should do. I think that would be honorable, and I think that don't start, dude. I mean, unless he's coming out and doing crazy things, and the coach says, Alex, look, I'm going to offer you the starting position, and he decides to take it. But that's his own choice. But I think honestly, he does play maybe one more season this last year, contribute, and just ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, I think he will announce his retirement in some time in the next couple of months. There's no way that he plays in 2023, 2022. I don't think that's how this is going to work. This story for Alex Smith, the fact that he came back from this serious injury is fantastic. Comeback player of the decade. It's just not worth it. Just sit on the bench, just be your backup, and then just ride off into the sunset.
There you go. Alex, if you're listening, this is approved.
We still love you.
Listen to us. We love you. Well, Sammy, that's all the time that we've got for today. We want to thank everybody for joining us here on U-Dash. Please don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Dash Sports TV. And also check out our website, dashsports.tv. We will see you all next week. And as always, go Utes.